Mikey P, Mike Probosi back in the Money Players podcast. Weekend recap, and the best recapper on this network is Nick Tammaro. Nick is with me. Welcome back, Nick, for some more reviewing a couple weeks to the Derby.
Yeah, we're getting there, my friend. We're rolling hardcore now. I'll be in Louisville in a little under 2 weeks, so very excited. Looking forward to Derby week and all the secondary stakes races that'll take place as part of the weekend's activities. Looks like we've got a pretty good sense of what the Derby field is going to look like. Of course, there'll be a ton of coverage on the network of that. You and I are going to focus more on what happened last weekend.
Yeah, and Keeneland in full swing. 8 straight days just finished this past Sunday. Plenty of graded races, and we're going to go back to Friday. I think that was one of the races of the weekend. Maker's Mark Mile, always a big race on the calendar. Carl Spackler showed up, and some people were curious, could he return the way he was last year? I think he did more than that. He looked phenomenal winning, just crushing that. Now, I don't know if it was necessarily a grade 1 field, but he's certainly a grade 1 horse.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was going to say something very similar to what you just laid out, which is that Carl Spackler had been good in 2024. He was really good on Friday, just looked much more complete. I don't know exactly what you can attribute it to. I don't know if maybe Flavien was a little bit more confident than Tyler had been. This is a tough horse for Tyler, right? His father-in-law owns him, and he's obviously a horse that Tyler has a lot of affinity for. But there were times where it looked like Carl Spackler was really only good when he had some measure of control over the race. And what I mean by that is not necessarily that he was setting the pace or maybe that he was actively stalking. He came from every bit of 2+ lengths off of this, just totally engulfed the field at the quarter pole and drew off, looking really good. So I was impressed by his effort. All in all, he made what looked like probably, as you alluded to, about a grade 1.5 field look like allowance horses. So it was a very strong effort. I'm intrigued to see where he ends up going now. I would imagine a race like the Poker on Belmont weekend in advance of some of those big grade 1 objectives throughout the summer. Do I think they'll probably look to push him a little bit distance-wise? I don't know. There's really not much reason to get beyond a mile. So I think Chad will keep him in all the main spots. You probably work back from the other mile at Keeneland in October and just see where you land along the way.
Yeah, and some of the also rans in there. A couple of nice ones. I mean, Integration, I just don't think he wants a mile. He's grinding out these grade 1 placings at these mile races that I don't think necessarily suits him. He's much better off going a little bit longer. I thought he raced pretty well considering. And Trickery came back off the bench for Graham Motion and ended up third in there. He finished pretty well. That could set him up going forward.
Yeah, I mean, these are just horses that are going to feast when the opportunities are there when you don't have a horse like Carl Spackler. So I would think that with Integration, there's probably a decent chance they bring him back in 3 weeks on Derby Day and try that. The mile at an 8 seems like it would suit him quite a bit more than this mile. He's probably more of a Manhattan horse than a horse like Carl Spackler, who I don't think they would stretch out to a mile and 3/16. So I would imagine Integration ends up in races like the Arlington Million and the Manhattan along the way. Certainly deserving of it. Good second at 3-1.
There was another stake on Friday that was pretty nice. Just a 3-year-old filly stake going 5.5. It was the Limestone. Pretty big field there. She's So Spicy ended up wiring. I would imagine several of these will be very prominent throughout the year in this division.
Yeah, she's good. She kind of took on all comers and held everybody off. It was a race that was largely dominated on the front end. Abby and Toe, who was third, looks like she's pretty good, but She's So Spicy has now taken her game to the turf and really raised it to another level. So I thought she ran really well. And Jose D'Angelo is a guy who seems like can send his horses anywhere, and they keep performing. There's no substitute for speed when you're sprinting on the grass. So it was a tough performance to poke any holes in. Thought she looked really good and certainly ran to the favoritism.
Well, let's switch to Keeneland Saturday. A couple graded stakes that day. The final Derby prep, not really, though. I don't think any of these horses will be showing up in the Derby. The horses coming from the Lexington typically will probably maybe target the Preakness here. But Gosger was a nice winner at 4.3-1. A couple of the hype horses, the Praters, the Hypnos, the Bullards of the world really made very little impression in this race.
Yeah, you and I talked about this race in advance of it early last week, and I didn't really get the love for Bullard. I feel pretty confident that Bullard is a one run, one turn horse, and I did not like his prospects of really succeeding in a spot like this. They bet him down to just less than 2-1, and he didn't run a step. So I don't know if he needed a race off the bench, but to me, when a horse going long is under a drive with 3 furlongs to go and they just never pick up, it's because they want to run shorter. They don't have anything to offer at that stage. So I'm looking forward to seeing Bullard cut back. Prater was bad. Prater probably isn't really that good when push comes to shove, and I think he made that clear. He's not really of graded stake caliber at this point. We'll see if maybe he develops a little bit down the line, but I wouldn't hold out a whole ton of confidence on that. Gosger was in the right place at the right time. He got an excellent ride by Irad. He's a horse that was cut out to be good. He was bet heavily on debut, came back and won a maiden race that I think the public poked a few holes in because of how Pitkin ran in his next start. And I think that's what led Gosger to go off a bigger price. I made Gosger a shorter price on the morning line than Bullard. Clearly I was wrong about Bullard, but I didn't see that level of support coming, especially because California form is not always respected all that much when you come to the eastern part of the United States. So, Gosger got an 87 buyer, I think. Is he really a Preakness horse? He's probably more of a Matt Wynn horse and one that maybe Brendan Walsh can let develop a little bit longer. Depending on how the Derby shakes out, obviously, it feels like there's a pretty decent chance that the Preakness is just way too tough for this horse. So we'll see. I'm not really over the moon with him as a grade 1 caliber horse. I think it was just a kind of a run-of-the-mill type effort for a horse that does at least have some potential to develop down the line.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you really want any of these horses coming out of this race,
really.
Especially to step up? I mean, I really don't. And now, I mean, some of these races beyond the Derby, a lot of these horses skip the Derby. The Preakness could end up being a short field with some of these minor stakes. You don't see horses improving necessarily. So, I mean, it doesn't bode well, I don't think, for any of these going forward.
No, not really. I mean, you might see just a sort of some attrition, obviously, coming out of the Derby, and that maybe helps a few of these, but there was nobody in here who I would say, boy, I'm really intrigued to get a future on him in the Preakness.
Absolutely. So grade 1 on Saturday at Keeneland, the Jenny Wiley here on the grass. And this is upper 4-year-olds and up fillies and mares. And certainly not without controversy with Choyosa winning, but certainly there was interesting bumping in this stretch. No inquiry. There was an objection. Excellent Truth did have to take up significantly mid-stretch as the winner ended up coming out, trying to, I think, maybe look Kehoe Beach in the eye there, who I thought raced pretty well. I'm not sure about the ride. I thought maybe she needed a little separation at the top of the stretch, didn't get it. And she continued on. I didn't think she raced very bad in the race. She raced well. This was a nice race. It felt like a grade 1 type race. And what was your take on the stretch run and the winner?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to be honest about it, and I'm going to look at it as a horse player. This was a pretty mind-boggling non-disqualification, in my opinion. First of all, I was really surprised to see them not hang the inquiry sign. Just based on what we saw down the stretch, you would assume that they would have wanted to take a more in-depth look at it. Well, then Flavian Pratt filed an objection, and I thought, Mikey, from the first head-on replay, this was like a no-brainer decision. It felt to me like Luis Saez steered Choisia out into the path of Excellent Truth, forced that horse to steady, who then came back on the inside and nearly got there, losing by a half length after being as much as a length and a quarter behind after she steadied out of it. So, the stewards made the decision feeling as if there wasn't a spot there for Excellent Truth to enter into. Not a decision I agree with as a horse player. Not a move by Luis Saez that I really want to see rewarded all that often, because I think he deliberately steered the horse out into the path of another horse to try and keep that one from running by. I thought Kehoe Beach ran extremely well in here, coming back off the layoff. I think she's a really dangerous horse in mile filly and mare turf races. There aren't a ton of those, but maybe you'll see her come back quickly in the Distaff Turf Mile. on Derby Day. Maybe we'll see her come back in the Just a Game, going a mile up at Saratoga. I think both of those seem like obvious spots. What you have to consider when you look at Kehoe Beach's race is that Frankie was deliberately keeping her off the rail, number one. I'm not sure if she has an aversion to horses being on her inside or what exactly the rationale for that was. But, I mean, she completely shredded Be Your Best. And Be Your Best was within a half length of her at the 3/4 split, which, you know, she went just shy of 47. She went a really strong pace. And again, I mean, Be Your Best was nowhere at the finish. Now, that said, Choisia was never that far off of it. So, you know, a Euro with the ability to race forwardly is always going to have a future in the United States. So I'd love to see these horses square off again. I think it would be a lot of fun, hopefully in a race like the Just a Game. I don't know if any of them will come back quickly enough for the Distaff Turf Mile with it being a grade 2, but that would be amazing as well. So I don't see it was not, I would have been in the camp of disqualification just because I think that was an actionable foul.
Well, you were worried about the line in this race. All 8 horses between 3-1 and under 10-1. So pretty tough race to make a line. And I think you had it pretty well nailed.
Yeah, your no-show Sammy Joe took a lot of money. I was the Euro that took no money was Jabara. And so that threw my line off a little bit. I thought she'd take a little bit more money, but Excellent Truth ended up going off a relatively soft favorite. Kehoe Beach was the second choice. So I got it about as right as I think you can. It's a guessing game with these Euros, right? You never know which Euro running lines are going to get more support than others. So it's always a little up in the air, but turns out that Excellent Truth is probably, she's as interesting as any in there moving forward. We'll see how she performs in her next start. You would think that in Chad Brown's program now, in his camp, she's likely to get better as the year goes on. That's the hope.
Yeah, and plenty of big races, and he always has a barn loaded full of these types. Well, another grade 1 race on Saturday at Oaklawn, and this was the Apple Blossom, typically one of these top spots for these older fillies and mares. And the champ did it again. Torpedo Anna, was able to win easily by 4 1/4 lengths as the 1-9 favorite. Nick, I know you tweeted out after that the next race for her this year is probably the most important one, because I didn't think anyone else fired in here but her.
Yeah, and look, we're entering into a really ugly sort of phase with Torpedo Anna and her legion of fans on social media, because we've reached the point where it seems like objective analysis is not allowed. And I saw some like really idiotic comments by people about negativity and come on, man. We're talking about horse playing, right? We're talking about betting on races. I'm talking to people about what you're supposed to do to analyze how you make money betting on races. This isn't a fan conversation, right? I'm a fan of Torpedo Anna. I replied to somebody and said, for God's sake, I was at Oaklawn with my 5-year-old daughter on Saturday. I spent 20 minutes before the races explaining to her who Torpedo Anna is, that she ran against boys last year. So she was all about the girl power thing. Come on. All right. So you can objectively analyze Torpedo Anna and say, she's not really been that great this year, right? She's been good enough to win. She's a grade 1 winner this year. I think Kenny McPeak has done an outstanding job with her, if for no other reason than that, aside from like about a 2.5-month break, if it was even that, she's been in training for 14 months. And she's none the worse for wear. That's a really, really hard thing to do. It's really hard to keep a horse that good for that long. She is clearly exceptional. She's clearly very, very good. The problem that you have to have if you're somebody that objectively analyzes form is that so far this year, she has run against inferior horses. She's had soft trips, and she has not run fast races. And if you're ignoring those things, you're just willfully ignoring them. You're not seeing the forest for the trees. And you need to open your eyes about what's going on the racetrack. The problem that you're going to have with her is that you and I, as horse players, will gladly take on a situation where we think a horse may have a favorable pace scenario, taking a jump in class where they're going to be 8 or 10-1. In Torpedo Anna's next start, she's likely going to be facing, which is going to be in 20 days, according to Kenny McPeak. She is likely going to face a better field, even if horses like Cavalieri and Randomized are the only 2 grade 1 horses that run against her. She's going to face a better field. She's likely to face a less favorable pace scenario, and she's going to be coming back in 20 days. You and I would want 8-1 on a horse like that. She's going to be 3-5, right? That's what we're talking about.
I'd probably be less than that.
Right.
Absolutely.
She could be less than that. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about disliking the horse, not talking about not enjoying that she's really good, not tipping our cap to the connections for a really aggressive campaign. She put forth the best losing effort, probably one of the two best losing efforts, along with Fierceness's Breeders' Cup Classic of 2024. I'm a Torpedo and a fan, but it doesn't mean that I can't objectively analyze her form.
Right. That's absolutely true. And we're looking as horse players, like you mentioned, for horses that are vulnerable. We're trying to poke holes in favorites, and it really has nothing to do with the name in the program. We're looking to make money. And I can tell you, like playing this cross country pick 5 this past weekend, we took a shot against her because of what you have said so far, and the fact that she's just been okay. And this is the time that when you have these big favorites, that you can make scores because you take shots against them. And I can't wait to line up to take a shot against her next time because of everything we've said and everything that you've talked about and pointed out about with her. I mean, look at her in the Cotillion last year. That was one of her worst races. She ultimately won. She was 1-9 in there, though, and nearly got beat in a race that she looked over a barrel to be the winner in there. So like you mentioned, the next spot for her, is really going to be very interesting and probably a good opportunity to play against for sure.
I think so. I mean, and look, you look at her PPs right now, Mikey, there's got to be some concern about whether she left too much on the racetrack on Travers Day. And I know people are going to hear that and they're going to say, well, she's won 4 races since then, including 3 grade 1s. Look at the speed figures. Right? Look at the competition. Look at the speed figures. Look at the setups. They've not been as good. She had things go. She had very little go her way, I would say, in the Travers. I mean, she didn't really have anything work against her. She ran her race and she lost by a head and got a 109 by her. In the 3 starts since then, she's sort of been nearly heavily used to catch gun song. She won the Breeders' Cup Distaff in routine fashion, but we know what happened there field-wise, right? All the heavies in there ended up scratching out. And now she's won a couple of races at Oaklawn with pretty favorable setups against inferior competition. There's going to be a day of reckoning for her. And that's all I was alluding to, is that whether it is in 20 days, which I hope it is, or it's in the Ogden Phipps, the competition's going to get tougher. The distance might get longer if it's the Phipps. And the objective is going to be harder. And we want to find situations like that to bet against that kind of horse. The other problem that you have with it, and we're going to talk about this horse in a couple of minutes, just recapping in general, is an allowance horse ran over a second faster than her 30 minutes earlier at Oaklawn on Saturday. And, there was no big disparity in the pace. The pace of the faster race was slower. So that means they came home significantly slower in the Apple Blossom. And the argument that comes up that I just think is a losing argument from a horse playing perspective is, well, she could do more. She could have run faster. These aren't race cars. Right? There's not a pedal, right? It's not like Brian Hernandez could have said, yeah, I never got her out of 4th gear. She's a racehorse. She knows one thing. She knows to run. And let me tell you, I was sitting at the 16th pole and he was flagging her with the stick when they came by me. So he was asking her to go. Could he have really, gotten down on her belly a little bit more and asked her for more? Probably. Doesn't mean she was going to run faster. I don't buy that argument. I made too many speed figures over the years to think that that's a cogent argument.
Yeah, and it's a grade 1 race, and they were certainly trying. And personally, I didn't think that the horses behind her fired whatsoever. I mean, where's my ring? She probably needs Lasix. That's probably her big thing. I mean, she could have bounced off that 103 figure, and Feel Like a Girl was another one that didn't really race all that great. And, it seemed to me that didn't fire. It was no danger to the winner. But, I mean, really, do you want either one of those two coming out of this race? I don't.
No. Feel Like a Girl's a great story, a regional horse that's made over $1 million now and is multiple grade 1 place. So she's a really easy horse to like, but hard to imagine is a real legitimate grade 1 performer. So yeah, I mean, you're looking at the 2 horses, looking at the nominations for the La Troyenne that you would fear are randomized in Cavalieri. Cavalieri is an up and coming Bob Baffert horse who's 4 for 4 and recently won a couple of stakes races in California, and randomized is obviously a multiple grade 1 winner who won the Alabama in 2023 and won the Phipps last year. She's been on the shelf since last year's Personal Ensign, where she got involved in just a suicide pace with Idiomatic, and then Raging Sea ran them down. Raging Sea is nominated for that race. I'm not sure if Chad's planning on running both. I suppose it's totally possible. Torpedo Anna handled Raging Sea in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Again, that was courtesy of a pretty favorable pace setup. So that's all we're talking about, is where we can find vulnerability. Finding vulnerability and betting the right way is how you make money at the racetrack.
Well, this recap show is brought to you by Twin Spires and Twin Spires tournaments. Plenty of tournaments this week. Horseshoe Indy pops up here on Tuesday for their opening card, and we have a meet preview show that's up on the network now on the audio side that Nick was in charge of and recorded for us with John G. Dooley, who's the track announcer there. So check out that show. Plenty of Keeneland contests on Wednesday, on Friday. $800 KDBC qualifier there on April 19th. And then we have a big one for Churchill on the next Saturday. So check out Twin Spires, everything leading up to that Kentucky Derby betting challenge where we know plenty of Derby tickets, $250,000 guaranteed prize pool. Go to twinspires.com, check out the tournament tab, get involved in these contests today. So just a couple more races, Nick, from this past weekend. And you mentioned that 2X allowance at Oaklawn, the race prior to that Apple Blossom that was won by Awesome Aaron. Huge figure for this horse. Now, this is a 6-year-old here from the Norm Cassie barn. Speedy, but this is nothing like this he's ever really produced in his life.
Yeah, he ran huge. Look, 143.19 for a mile and a 16th. When you juxtapose that against the 144.27 that Torpedo Anna ran, I think you've got to respect this effort big time. Obviously, when these horses are coming out of stakes competition and they can utilize Lasix, it does lead to generally some bigger performances. But he was really good. And I mean, when Christian Torres brought him to the lead around the far turn, he turned everybody back very easily, which included his stablemate Baddest Good Boy, who was coming out of the Razorback, and a Lat Long, who had gone off a slight favorite in there, also for Kenny McPeak. So really good effort from Awesome Aaron, who looks like a horse that you might see in a small stake race coming up at some point pretty soon. I wonder if Norm might consider a race like the Pimlico Special. Looks like another furlong would be no issue for the son of Practical Joke, who again was really, really sharp on Saturday. 104 Beyer speed figure.
Another graded race on Saturday at Oaklawn. And it was the grade 3 Count Fleet, and the favorite obliged in their booth. Now, this is a Steve Asmussen, a horse that's certainly up and coming. Was 3-5 in there, has won a couple in a row now at Oaklawn. Listed stake, then the grade 3 Whitmore. Now, this past race, and another nice effort here. And let me check the figure real quick.
Yeah,
97 on the Buyers Go. Yeah. So, but a pretty nice horse, definitely a player in the sprint division.
Yeah, Steve's going to keep him somewhat short. They're going to go to the True North on Belmont Stakes. I believe it's on Belmont Stakes Day. I know it's Belmont Stakes Racing Festival up at Saratoga. And this is a horse that Eric Asmussen got his first graded stake winner on, got another one on Saturday. Pretty much all out to hold off Rivet late. The deep closers really didn't make much of an impression. I don't know how good this effort was, Mikey. I'm not really sure. I know it wasn't as good as his 2 prior races. It was solid. Mm-hmm. And so we'll see if he performs the same way outside of Oaklawn. He feels like a horse that desperately needs the lead. He's not nearly as effective when he doesn't have the lead. And he did shrug off Anarchist somewhat nicely in there, who really took it to him around the turn. So solid effort from Booth. Steve Asmussen has now won the Count Fleet 4 years in a row. And now won it with a horse that is by a horse that he won the Count Fleet with 6 years ago in Matoli. So it's been a pretty amazing run for Steve over the years in this race, a meaningful sprint race down at Oaklawn that went for $500,000. Probably needs to be upgraded off that grade 3.
Okay, Nick, any other spots you want to touch on from the past weekend? I know there was a nice maiden winner, Big Trust. I know I didn't prepare you for this, but that one looked very impressive on Saturday at Keeneland. Another one that just caught my eye.
Yeah, Brian Lynch trainee. You know, Lynchy's very good with firsters, and this was one that looked very complete, sat nicely just off the pace and powered clear late. So looking forward to seeing this one try some tougher objectives. I think that fig was around 90. Is that right?
88, actually. Yeah.
88. Okay. Yeah. So, looked really good. We'll see where he ends up going. This is a son of Justify out of a Curlin mare. So you'd like to think distance is in the future. And this feels like a horse that we might see in some races with some names on them pretty soon.
Well, Nick, always good to be with you. Plenty of Keeneland still to go. And maybe we can catch up for one of the shows for the Friday or Saturday show this weekend if you're available. I know you're a busy man.
Absolutely. I'm always available for you.
Well, this has been a production of In the Money Media. Check out everything that's on the network right now, the YouTube channel. Monster Pods are rolling along for the Derby. They're out early this year, so check those out. That final Derby top 10 is out. I know PTF and Eric DeCoster have an audio show this week also for that final Derby top 10. We'll see you all next time, and we'll keep enjoying Keeneland. Keep enjoying this great racing season we got going on.